Okay, I'll go ahead and state it again. Meeting called to order at 6:32. Sorry. We'll go ahead and get started. The minutes. Are there any changes to the minutes? Any motions to approve the minutes? Did everyone get an opportunity to read the minutes, the latest minutes that were sent out? Any changes to the minutes? Any approval? Motions to approve the minutes then?
Were the attachments included? I saw that they were supposed to be included and I could have missed them, so.
Oh, you didn't? Okay, hold.
The first one, Dr. Coleman, was when they originally, today I saw a couple of little grammar changes. So I don't think Tangi sent the attachments again.
Okay, got it. So it's from previous. Okay, no problem.
Okay. So did anyone not get an opportunity to review the minutes? Okay. Any motions to approve the minutes?
This is Sheila Bryant, so moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Bryant.
Seconded. Danny Vergamini, second the motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Vergamini. I'll call the roll. Ashley, can you hear me okay? I'll take that as a yes then. All right. I'll start with you, Mrs. Springs.
Here.
Motion
Well,
to
used to
approve.
that. I'm used to being last. I'm here.
That's why I went first this time. Motion to approve. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I should have taken the roll. I apologize. Thank you for that. So let me back up. And let me start off with the roll. Can you hear me okay, Ashley?
Yes, I'm sorry. I can hear you.
Okay, cool. Just making sure. My apologies again. Thank you for that check, Spring. We're gonna start with you first anyway next time. Danny, Denise, I'm sorry, Tamika. Hold on, give me a second. Pulling up my thing. Okay, let me back up. Let's just go ahead and approve the minutes. And Ashley already has that. So, Ms. Springs, I'm coming back to you. Approval of the minutes. It was seconded by Mr. Vergamini. Okay. Dr. Coleman,
Aye.
Mr. James,
No.
Mr. Sanchez,
Yes.
Mr. Melton,
Yes.
thank you, sir. Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
thank you, sir. Mrs. Bryant,
Aye.
Mrs. Ridley is absent. And for the record, Mr. Vergamini,
Yes, however, I'm
go ahead, sorry.
curious if we need to do any amendments to any of the minutes. Or are we approving as is?
Did you read the last version of the minutes?
Are we, I did not, so I'll abstain from this, but I just didn't know if there were any amendments to the meeting or any changes needed. But if everybody else is good with it, I'm good with it. It's just a very weird vote for me, so I'll say aye.
Mr. Chair,
Sorry,
Yes.
didn't mean to confuse anything.
No. Yes, ma'am.
I'll wait till you finish with it, and then I wanted to make a comment going forward.
Okay, Did I miss anyone? I apologize. And, oh, I had to go to, Dr. Coleman.
Thought she said I, didn't she?
Okay. Just wanted to write it down. Okay, cool. Yes, ma'am, Marva Jo.
So I wanted to, I think there was some.
Excuse me, I'm sorry,
Oh.
Chair Duvall, did you want to share your vote for the minutes before
Oh,
we?
thank you. Yes. Aye. Yes. Thank you, Tangi.
There was some back and forth, and so as it relates to the minutes, I sent something out. I think there was some, I also had a conversation with staff today, really just about how long, and I'm glad they didn't take very long today, but want to propose a process so that it is clear going forward. Once Ms. Allen sends out the minutes, if you have recommended changes to those minutes, please send them to Ms. Allen and to myself. Then they will be forwarded from her to the entire group for you all to consider. And then they will come back in the meeting to be voted on. The minutes as written and any proposed revisions to those minutes. We are doing it this way in hopes of, one, giving people a pre-opportunity to do it and not have to do it for the first time in the meeting, but also giving people an opportunity to be able to review. And so there may be, in certain instances, there may be issues with style that may not, it may be correct, but style. In other instances, it may just be wrong, like a vote count may be wrong, and those will be corrected and sent back out. So it's just trying to find a way to not hold you all up in the meeting, but also having it come and be sent back out. So hopefully that process is clear and will work for everybody. That was it for me, Chairman.
Thank you, Marva Jo. Okay, minutes approved. Second on the agenda is under old business administrative hearing board appointments. Did everybody get an opportunity to vote? Okay, I saw that.
I think, and I think this is my fault. I'm not sure I sent everybody the results, did I?
Are we talking about the administrative board or the hearing board? There, come on, you're confusing.
This is
Hearing board?
administrative hearing board.
Yes.
I did not get a copy of the.
That's my
results.
fault, because today I said I was gonna send it and I completely forgot. Let me do that right now.
Okay.
Or you can move on and talk about, y'all want to discuss the candidates while I go to my email so that I can send it out.
Okay. I did write down the tallies. Thanks for sending that to Tangi. So I looked at the tally, and the top two vote getters were Jana Parker. She received the most votes. I think it was 10. She had 10 yes. And the second was James Freeney. He had 6 yes votes. Who else came? Then Mr. James, I just put James C. He had 5 yes votes. And Arnita had 4, and so did Linda. But Denise, if you send that out, that'll be great.
Ashley, do you have it handy?
Let me see.
I'm just gonna forward this. I'm gonna forward what I have here to everybody.
Okay, thank
It
you.
comes from Ashley. Let's see.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So have those persons been notified, and what is the next step for them? Do they have to be appointed, or is there some formal ceremony or what?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask Denise that next question.
No, you just refer their names to the ACC. Since everything for the hearing board is administered on the ACC, your only responsibility is to make the selection.
And so.
And there is no formal swearing in. And no, they have not been notified because you haven't affirmed your decision.
Okay. Okay, and they also have training as well, right?
Yes, and I sent you something today regarding that training.
Yeah, I saw that. Okay.
Okay, I just sent it out. I sent it to everyone.
Okay, any discussion on that?
Well, the last conversation was that it would be those individuals who received a majority, and of that list, only 2 received a majority.
So can I move that those 2 individuals' names be referred to the ACC?
Yes, ma'am.
That's also there.
Thank you, Mrs. Bryant. Anyone want to second that?
Who was the 2 again?
Oh, sure, Mr. O'Neill. Jana Parker and James Freeney.
And just to confirm, Mr. Freeney received 5 votes.
Mr. Freeney.
6.
6 votes.
Oh, okay.
Which one is Freeman? Is that the CIA man or who is that?
Mr. Freeney was, I believe, the second interviewee.
That's the homeless guy?
Okay.
I mean, is that the guy who said he's over the homeless stuff?
Okay, yes.
That he said he didn't have enough time for? Okay, all right.
Did everybody get the email?
I haven't gotten it yet.
Okay.
I did, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry. I know I'm
Yes,
talking
ma'am.
a lot. I just wanted to make one other comment. There was at least one person who got 5. I think there was an email that came out from you or from Denise that indicated that attending the interviews was not a prerequisite for voting on candidates. But I think some people abstained prior to that email going.
Yeah.
So I wasn't sure if that had any impact on any of the individuals who abstained because they weren't in attendance, and whether or not you wanted to address it or not.
Yes, no, Dr. Coleman, did you have any questions? Because I think you were out that day.
Yeah, I was. I don't have any questions. I don't think offhand, other than, I mean, I don't know if it'll, because I wasn't present, will it affect my ability to affirm the candidates or not?
Okay. Mr. Melton, did you miss a day? You were here for both, right? Oh, no, you missed a day?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, okay.
But I wasn't sure if, I guess the question became if somebody felt like they could vote since they knew they could without attending, if that had any bearing, because that might have affected the person who got 5. I don't know if it was based on abstentions or not, so.
Okay. How do you feel, Dr. Coleman, and Mr. Melton, about your votes?
And Danny abstained as well.
Oh, Danny, I'm sorry. Are you okay with with that now, knowing that you didn't have to be present, Mr. Melton?
Well, I did have some questions initially about our voting system, and I think I don't have any issue if I don't vote for someone, but being as though no's actually carried weight. It definitely, I guess, would appear to have an impact on the 2 individuals that I did not see having an interview.
Okay. Dr. Coleman?
Yeah, I'm sort of just thinking through the process, just based on the discussions about how we were going to determine, from my recollection, it was going to be the top vote getters. So this may be a question for Margaret Jo, will the abstentions affect, you know, the total number or the ranking of the Ms. Parker, Mr. Freeney? Will the abstentions affect? Because, you know, because the abstention obviously is you don't vote either way. So I don't know if that affects it. I guess I'm kind of with Mr. Melton, like with the abstentions.
It did affect because at least one who got 5, and I'm not looking at it, that person who got 5 may have gotten a vote and not an abstention, which could have given them a majority.
Got it.
And there would have to be a process, but I think there was some lack of clarity as it related to this. So Chairman and I thought it important to bring it back up for discussion, knowing that you all made a decision originally, but as a body, you can alter that decision. So.
I think one recommendation I couldn't think of
Mhm.
is that for anyone who missed one or more interviewees, that all of their votes go to, we remove all of their votes and see how the votes would have shaken out. And if anyone would have had a relative majority.
And I think you make a good point, Mr. Melton, that the majority was based on, it was in the initial discussion, it was based on all members on the board. If the board, you would need to vote to change that.
Mhm.
Because the vote was based on the number, not on those in attendance at the time, anyway.
Okay, hold on.
I think I would be curious why someone who did or was present would abstain. I don't know if anyone did that.
Okay.
Is that the case? Did anybody abstain even though they were able to see all of the interviews?
No,
So
no.
I'll mention just what I did, and you guys can. I'm kind of curious how this is a little confusing how this is breaking out, but so I attended all but the last interview that wound up getting postponed. So I was unable to attend that Monday night. So I voted for individuals, and it was yes, no, and so I voted for the individuals that I was able to participate in the interview. And then for that person, I left that blank and did not vote yes or no. And I wrote an email saying I abstained from voting for or against this person because I was not at the interview. It was my understanding when I did that should then not affect, essentially, it shouldn't count as a no vote. You know, like in terms of some, it seems as though, and maybe I'm just misunderstanding. It seems as though if they had to meet a critical number, that abstaining from that vote would also give that person a no vote, or it sort of counts as a no vote. Am I misunderstanding that, or am I?
So Danny, you actually might be onto something. And we may, Marva Jo, we may need to vote on this, but we could probably assign a scoring system. And then abstentions do effectively represent a 0.
Right.
And then no's could represent -2, yeses could be +2, something like that.
I mean, however we did it, I would hope that my abstention doesn't count one way or the other.
Right.
From that person being.
It didn't count against it, but it didn't count for it either. So they didn't receive a majority. A person who didn't receive a majority had nothing to do. They just didn't get the majority. So you abstain.
So then that worked correctly, it sounds like.
It worked correctly, but to something that Mr. Melton was, what we didn't do, the original way was that it was a majority of all of you. It wasn't based on a majority of who was at that particular meeting.
That's correct.
Right. So it was based on all 10. And you had to get 6. And only 2 people got 6. One person got 5, but I believe one of the individuals who got 5, there were Denise, or there were abstentions.
For the person that got 5?
Mhm.
Nope, no abstentions.
No abstention. And it wasn't affected. Okay. And the other ones were down to 4, I think, right? 4.
Mhm. Yes.
Okay, so I don't think it affected it. I'm sorry, I thought there was 1-5 that
Oh,
there
okay.
were extensions.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Thank you, Denise. Was that Danny, did that answer your question?
Yes, I think so. So I'm good with how I voted
Okay,
and how it worked out. That's fine.
okay. And I'll come back to you, Mr. Melton. Dr. Coleman? I saw you shaking your head. I thought you had something to
Yeah,
say.
no, I was just concurring with Mr. Bergamini.
Oh, okay.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Sure. Okay, Mr. Melton, now. You said that we should
Yeah,
do it.
I think Marva Joe kind of cleared it up that we don't have one that would have been swayed to a 5. So
Due to the
I think effectively it kind of took care of itself.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Marva Joe. So then
That
everyone,
means we're gonna have to go back to the till. But what we did realize is that in the legislation, the guidance says one thing and it talks about 2. The actual legislation had no number. So it could have been, putting forth one name. So if you all affirm these 2, you will have met your obligation under the statutory requirements.
okay. So is everyone okay with the 2? Jenna Parker and
Yes, I have a question though.
yes, sir. Go ahead.
So if we put forth the 2, what we talked about previously is putting forth or creating some sort of pool of folks that would work with the administrative hearing committee. How do we plan to then create that pool? I know we had talked about a couple of ideas previously. Can you clarify a little bit of how we're going to create that pool then?
Right. So, I mean, I thought we want to talk about that. And I know we had talked about posting things on the website and things like that. And also some type of verbiage in a letter to the people who were not chosen, that they would still be placed in the pool. Am I correct with that, Denise?
That they would be considered later, not that they would be placed in a pool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And that, I'm sorry, Danny. Somebody
Yeah.
say something. Oh, go ahead, Mr. O'Neill.
Yeah, I mean, because I think what Danny's talking about now is more relevant, because if I remember, Mr. Freely is the one that said basically he doesn't have a lot of time and he would have to get a longer notice in order for him to attend the hearing. So I think what Danny is talking about, we have to make sure that we have at least one extra person.
Mhm.
Because I mean, I took my notes and he was the one that.
That's not quite what I'm talking about. We had talked about creating a pool of, I think
Yeah.
it was 5 or 10 people,
And
in
what-
case the officer or a party of the hearing committee had a conflict or something, or in case there was an appeal that they wanted a party removed or something, that they would go to the next person on the list and so forth. And so, or just availability, as you're kind of talking about availability.
Yeah,
But I think we had talked
that's
about.
what I'm saying. And that's
Okay.
I was saying that it's more important now to have that extra person or that second team, as I've been saying, because of this. Because I think one of the people, Freely, was saying that basically sometimes he won't be as available as ready as Ms. Parker said. Put it that way. When I was listening to it. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I remember that. So the next time we'll get it, we want to
You have to, Mr. Chair. You 2 made the 6.
right.
And if they didn't get it, then y'all will probably have to go back to trying to get another pool for interviews.
Got you. Okay. All right, sorry
So
for people.
does not having 6 preclude us from picking someone? If we decided that was something we wanted to entertain?
You mean picking someone to
So
be on?
getting a majority was a given, you would be selected because that's the precedent that we set.
Mhm.
But I didn't know that if that would exclude someone from having consideration to be an additional candidate to enter our pool, just because they didn't meet the majority.
I think that was the premise under which we were operating, that you had to have a majority of votes in order to be nominated. And there is a motion on the floor.
Mhm.
Who made the motion, Mr.
I
Chair?
did.
Oh,
Mrs.
you
Bryant?
did. Okay. Was there a second?
No.
Okay.
Any seconds?
What was the motion again?
To affirm the 2 top vote getters to be.
Yes.
What'd you say, Mr. O'Neill?
No, I just said, what was the motion? I'm
Oh,
just
I
saying.
thought somebody was saying something. To affirm the 2 top vote getters of the interview and have them
Mr.
appointed.
Chair, I just wanted to modify that. The 2 who received the majority of the votes.
Okay, thank you. The 2 who received the majority of the votes to be appointed to the AHB.
Received the majority vote.
Danny Vergamini, I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Vergamini. Take the roll. Ms. The chair, yes. Dr. Coleman?
Aye.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. James?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Melton?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Mr. O'Neill?
Yes.
Mrs. Ridley is absent. Mr. Sanchez?
Aye.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Springs?
Aye.
And for the record, Mr. Vergamini?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Bryant?
Aye.
Thank you, ma'am. Did you get that, Tangi?
I did, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. So I think, Mr. Melton, you were saying the scoring system. Yeah. So I think maybe moving forward, we can look at doing something like that. Maybe that'll help clear up the confusion. So yeah, let's put that table that to talk about that, and we can get with you to to create that scoring system, your area of expertise, if you would say. That'd be okay? Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Oh, next on the agenda is strategic planning. Marva Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We sent out to the board a strategic plan outline. I wanted to thank Mr. Vergamini Danny for responding and making some recommendations or sharing some other strategic plans. This outline was designed for a couple of reasons. It was really, there were certain things that when we have the strategic plan, we wanted to narrow down some of the issues, so those recommendations coming from staff as part of that strategic plan could be captured based on what the board was interested in. So we sent to each one of you a series of questions that might help us to pare down so that when we have the actual strategic planning session, we wouldn't be all over the place. I will say, let me give can I do shout to Dr. Coleman, who was the only person who responded to the request for comments. And so I am going to take what we had put forth and appendage it with her comments, which were very much appreciated. And that's going to be the basis of us trying to finalize the outline itself. And then once we have that, we will then start putting together a recommendations on the community outreach plan, for example, the rules of procedure, those things that are listed in here. When we get to the next phase after the actual process, then we will look what these are the pieces that will be in the strategic plan. You will have an opportunity to pare it down, and then at the conclusion of those meetings, then we'll put an outline of what it should look like. So we hope that by doing this, will save a little time in the process and really get to the meat. So I'm just going to start with number one. And again, I want to say, Dr. Coleman, thank you so much, because, you know, we were starting this kind of cold, and having a different perspective was very, very helpful. Let me also say that the strategic plan components that we sent out to you were based on the statutory requirements of the PAB, and both as it relates to required and discretionary. And so that's what helped inform what was included in here, because these are the things that we are required to do. The first question for you all was, do you want to do both a short-term and a long-term strategic plan? And the only comment that I got was no to a short-term and yes to a long-term. And so if anybody has any comments different than that, please let me know. If long-term, then it will most likely be a 3 to 5 year plan.
Okay, that was kind of my question, is what do you consider a short-term plan? What do you consider a long-term plan?
The long-term plan was going to be 3 to 5. The short-term would
And a short-term is
a year.
Okay.
I personally, my opinion that we should develop a short-term plan, since this is an abbreviated year somewhat, and we won't have as much opportunity to get to some of the things that we may think important.
Okay. So what I'm going, okay. So thank you, Ms. Bryant. So what I'm going to do, and let me just say and you all are probably going to get mad at me, but it certainly would have helped to have gotten this, so I could have gotten the votes and then we could have just known. But for the things we don't, we will go ahead and vote forward. So, and this is not a vote. So we're not going to take a tally roll call. We're just going to ask you yay or nay. How many people want to do a short-term plan? And I'm going to ask the staff to help me know. How many people want to do a short-term? Can you all count for me?
Yeah, I mean, why would we?
Everybody has a chance to whatever. So whatever the vote is, if there's a majority that wants to do short-term, then we'll include that in here as something we'll consider. If there are not enough votes, we'll just see what the majority wants.
So if I'm understanding correctly, Marva Jo, you're just going to run down the list now and go, that sounds great. That sounds great. Yes. Thank you.
But I say again, it would have really helped. I would have had.
I apologize on behalf of the group as being guilty myself.
Well, I'll say I think I misunderstood the assignment.
But there were questions in here, and Denise was it said, please answer these questions that'll help inform us moving forward.
Yeah, but
okay.
Okay. So if you would just raise your hand if you want to do a short term. Denise, can you count? I think that's a majority. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think that's 6. Okay. So we will do a short term, long term, if you would raise your hand. What are you asking, Mr. O'Neill? I'm sorry.
I'm just saying, I think both of them is too long. I mean, because if you're talking about a 5-year plan, most of, I mean, that you're assuming that everybody's going to get reappointed or something like that. I mean, a short term, I was more looking at, 3 to 5 months and stuff like that. But when you say long term, let me finish. So long-term, you say 3 to 5 years. I mean, that's just seemed like a long period of times to me. I mean, and
May I comment? So even though if we develop a 3 to 5 year plan, that doesn't mean that it can be altered, but it gives you a direction.
but-
It's like if you got a map, then you know kind of where you're going. But if you don't have one, then you'll be pretty much lost. So I think having a plan, whether or not it's modified over time, is a good thing, just so we can stay focused on a direction.
I think it's also for the organization, the PAB, not us specifically as
Yeah.
individuals. So it's for the organization and what the organization wants to achieve. So for myself, I'd like to see the first one be a shorter term strategic plan and then you'd probably do another one that might have a longer, might be a longer strategic plan after that. That's typically the case with a lot of organizations. When they first start up, they have an initial strategic plan that's like a year or 2 years, and then they have a 3 to 5 year plan after that. They get amended all the time too. So as people come in or they change it or they move the organization or focus comes in, or maybe even the law changes or something like that, the strategic plans get amended. It's an azimuth, it's a direction. It says we're headed this way, and these are some of the things we want to do. Usually the strategic plan has a vision, goals, objectives. These are the things we want to accomplish. This is our values. This is what we want to do. And it sets out, kind of lets everybody know this is what we're about. It doesn't have every detail in it that you're going to want. It doesn't have SOPs. It doesn't have some of the other things. But it's a guide.
No, I'm not against having a strategic plan. I'm just saying, I think it's a short term that we should do with. That's all I'm saying. That's my point. You know what I mean?
Thank you, Mr. O'Neill. If I could get a raise on the hand on the long-term plan. I need to get 6 if we're gonna go forward. Let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do I not have, y'all might have to, I can't tell if I got 6 people.
You had 6.
Okay, all right, very good.
Okay, you had 6 for the short term and 6 for the long term?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah,
so. Yeah, so
are
we're
some
gonna do
people voting
both.
for both?
Yeah.
That's a little confusing to me. So how are you gonna choose which one?
You don't have to choose. You don't have to choose. We'll send something back, Denise, and give some recommendations on that, okay? I just wanted to know what the interest was. We'll send something back. And there are times when people will, as part of their visioning process, come up with, say, okay, in year 1 through 2, we're gonna do this. And then in 3 through 5, right? So as opposed to starting with the 3 to 5. So we will be able to do both if that's what you all want to do. Okay, the next one had to do with goals. How many goals? The Dr. Coleman suggested that we have 3 goals. Are you all okay with that?
I think that depends on what those goals are as to how many you're going to have. I mean, it seems like we're picking an arbitrary number.
It is arbitrary. We got to start somewhere. If we get there, Danny, and it's, was that you talking? I took my glasses off. If we get to the 3 and we decide, you know what, looking at it, we need to add 2 more. This is just, this document is a place for us to start.
So
And
I
then-
think one thing that would be helpful for me, and even if we are picking arbitrary numbers, is just how we might define the difference between goals, objectives, and milestones. Sometimes milestones are, certain benchmarks that you set.
And that's absolutely right.
Okay. And objectives and goals is kind of subjective. So is a goal more of a bigger?
It's a bigger picture.
And then
the objective is how you meet the goal. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So you might have a goal, which is your big picture, and then you may have 3 objectives that you'll use to meet that goal. It's a smaller subset of the goal, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
And objectives typically have like, measures, like, we're gonna hear 5 cases, at least a minimally of 5 cases once per quarter. Like they're much more sort of refined than a goal. And I think the reason why I chose 3 is because I thought it was a realistic number because I've been a part of a lot of strategic planning processes and people, it's heart's in the right place. And it's like, we have 5 goals. And the next thing you know, 5 turns to 7, and then you don't accomplish anything. So I just sort of thought 3 was a round number. Doesn't mean it has to be, but I just thought 3 was a good round number that we could achieve because we not only have a strategic plan, we have community outreach, we have working on the annual report, we have cases that are going to be referred, we have a lot going on. So just want to make sure that those goals, the number at least, is within reach.
And I thought yours, based on the mandatory requirements and the mission in the legislation, that made a lot of sense to me in terms of being realistic, being able to meet those goals. Because one of the things we don't want to do is put them out there in a strategic plan and then not get to them. And to something Danny said, it may adjust. This is really just a starting point. Mr. James, I think I saw your hand up.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I think that's where, for me, I'm leaning towards a shorter term strategic plan. I think right now we're just in the implementation phase, right? So we haven't even put it all in place to set a larger goal to grow off of or stretch. And so for me, I'm in the position of the shorter term so that we can focus on implementation, and strategic may come after we get the pieces in place that we know the legislation says we have to do. Our mandatory things, we haven't quite got there yet. Once we get those mandatory pieces in place, then I think we can set some goals to grow towards. But first, we just need to meet those mandatory requirements and then stretch ourselves after that. So that's why I'm hesitant on setting goals, because my first is for us to just meet the minimum requirements within the legislation.
And in all likelihood, Mr. James, the goals will be tied to those mandatory requirements.
Yeah, that's a great point. But I think I thought that was just the agreement we were making, is that initially we do short term and then we get to long term. So is it my understanding that by voting for both will be worked on simultaneously?
This is really just for the strategic planning session. And as a guidepost for the discussion, that's all it is. You may get there and say, as you start to have the conversation, you know what, I only want to look at year 1 through 2. Somebody else, that's, I think, what I heard Mr. James say. He just wants the more immediate, right? I think I heard someone else, Danny, talk about a more long-term vision. This is just for purposes of a framework for the discussion when we have the actual strategic planning session. This isn't the strategic planning session. This is helping me.
Right, but I thought maybe I just want to understand what the vision was. Okay. Was it to establish we are going to do short-term and long-term as the build out at the same time simultaneously?
That was what the vote was.
Oh, okay. They wanted to do both. I misunderstood.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's not really what I was voting for. I was saying that we need to develop a strategic plan short-term right now, and then build on that. That was my understanding of the vote. So maybe I need to revise that and vote for just the short term, and then, well.
So what we'll do is, because I don't want that to take up too much time, we'll come back to whether or not that piece, since there was some lack of understanding. How about that? And
that's fine.
We'll come back to it at the end of the discussion, after we've gone through the questions, if that would be okay. All right. The next one had to do with proposed objectives. Dr. Coleman suggested up to 5 objectives. Are you okay with that?
Give me an example what his objective is.
Dr. Coleman, I'm giving you a chance to say it again because you gave one earlier. I thought it was good. So go ahead again.
So an objective is something you can measure. Like, for example, we would review up to 3 complaints quarterly by the end of fiscal year 2023. Just making it up. We could have more than that, but we could say the board will review that's forwarded to us from the AHB will report up to no less or up to 3 complaints by the end of fiscal year 2023. That would be an objective. It's very specific.
So if I could just, I promise, I'm not trying to be difficult.
It's in difficult,
But
Mr. Nelson.
that also applies to milestones and measures or metrics too. They can all kind of sort of serve in that same the way you frame that.
Mhm.
And if we're going to be asked to give numbers for those too, it kind of gets a little murky.
Well, but there's a difference between output measures and like outcome measures. So output measures can be similar to objectives, but output measures, will even get any based on what I know about this process, it'll even get even more grainier than the objectives, right? So it's like you're breaking it down to the most base level. So if the objective is to hear minimally 3 cases quarterly so then the output would be, we're going to hear the 3 cases that came from the Riverdale Police Department, the Greenbelt Police Department, and the Bowie Police Department, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I mean, just being silly, but it even breaks, those measures will be even broken down even further.
So
can
I just give a small analogy? So if I build a workout plan, I see a goal is I want to gain weight, right? That's very high level, extremely high level. I want to gain weight. I want to put on muscle or mass. An objective might be arms, legs, abs. So you break it down into subsection. The milestones will be 3 months. I want to accomplish this by 3 months. The measures might be pounds. You might take some dietary measures, but that are specifically tied to metrics. So I kind of thought that I saw it that way. I'm not, this isn't my determination. I just, when I heard you frame it that way, it sounded like it would make it more difficult for me to then bring up additional measures if we already had measures that we were
And
using
sometimes,
as
Mr.
objectives.
Melton, I will see when there are milestones there, sometimes some of the objectives can be quantitative, and then some of the milestones can be qualitative. So you do it, but are you then, even though you've done it, how do you judge whether it took you back to your goal, right? So it a lot of times can be much more qualitative than the objective, if that makes any sense to you. So it really makes you take a deeper dive into whether or not you achieved the goal through the objective you set forth.
Okay.
So I'm going to leave that part. I know we're going to end the outline. I know what I have to do. The mandatory requirements are rules of procedure. Did not know if you felt like those rules of procedure should be included in our published strategic plan. Dr. Coleman said yes, and she thought it should be in the main body. So what say you, rest of you?
I'll raise my hand in agreement.
Okay. Anybody, let me put it a different way. Anybody disagree? Okay, you want to speak on it, Mr. James?
Sure. Again, as we're in this portion where we're evolving as a board and we're learning our processes, I think that document should be separate. So we aren't trying to keep updating that document as well. So our processes and procedures is something totally separate. And I think about it even in terms of those processes and procedures could be impacted by the work of the ACC or the Administrative Hearing Board. So that document may need to be a living document, not necessarily tied to this strategic plan. And certainly because it's that living document that may interact and engage with other boards, we should separate them so that it can stand alone on its own and we can modify it on its own and we can address it on its own. And it's never anchored in this strategic plan, and our measures don't have to change because something in our processes have changed.
Any other comments? Any other thoughts?
If you're talking about developing an SOP of sort of our standard operating procedures, if you will, of how we're going to go about things. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I think that should be separate from the strategic plan. I think the strategic plan, I mean, you can mention that in the strategic plan, or it can reflect the values or things of the strategic plan, but I think it should be a separate document.
Okay, so we'll take it as a vote. All wanting it inside of the document, or raise your hand. Let's see, 1, 2.
Say that again, Marvin. I'm sorry.
Those who wanted the rules of procedure to be included in the strategic plan, please raise your hand. I see 1, 2, 3. Okay, all that wanted as a separate document. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it'll be for purposes of a separate document. Okay. It will still be, just so you know, during the sessions, Denise is putting together recommendations for rules of procedure. So we will still be discussing it during that process. It just won't be included in the strategic planning document. Okay. All right. The next are.
I'm sorry, excuse me, Marva Jo.
Yes.
Just for record keeping purposes, these are still interest votes like polls, not official board votes, correct?
These are helping for us to outline. Yeah, you don't have to do any tallies. I can see it. It's just for guidance for me.
Okay, thank you.
Next one is mission and goals. I wanted to know if you all were supportive in the guidance. As you remember, the guidance was done by the work group, and we said to you all that it could be changed. So the original mission, as it said in the guidance, was to work with law enforcement to improve. I think, I'm looking at the one you did, Dr. Coleman, so I don't know if relationships with police is still what it said. But the suggested mission is to work with law enforcement agencies and the county government in Prince George's County to improve relationships with police. Any comments on that as the mission of the PAB?
So I'll just mention, and I'm honestly not trying to get nitpicky here, but to me, the goal is not to work with them. It's actually to improve. We could pull it straight out of the legislation.
It says to improve.
Yes, what I'm saying is that you have it prefaced somehow is that the goal is to work with law enforcement to do X, Y, and Z. And what I'm saying is that the goal is actually to do X, Y, and Z. The goal is not to work with law enforcement. That's a process. That's part of how we'll do it.
So let me go back, Danny. This is a mission. Maybe I'll read both together. One is a mission and one is the goal. The mission suggested is to work with law enforcement agencies and the county government in Prince George's County to improve relationships with police. The goal, as was in the guidance and as updated, suggested by Dr. Coleman, is to ensure transparency and increase the legitimacy of law enforcement agencies in Prince George's County while holding officers appropriately accountable.
I think the wording is too difficult. It's like people will look at that and say, this board is not doing what it's supposed to do. Because you're talking about working with them, like we friends with them and stuff like that. We supposed to basically try to make them do better. And when the wording seems like we're partners with them, we're not partners. We want to see we're reporting to the community that we force them to do better and making the police departments better. That's what I'm saying. It's just the word is shaky to me.
Okay, so what I'm going to suggest on this one is if each one of you will look at the guidance in the sheet that was sent to you, and if you have another recommendation for either the mission or the goal, can you send it to me by Monday? Is that going to be a problem for anyone?
No, we can do that. I mean, I'll speak for myself. I can do that.
Is it a problem for anyone? Okay, so we will move on because mission and goals can take a while and I don't want to use up all our time. I want to get to as many that we can agree upon. So we have some guidance as we go back. The next one is that in the budget book, there were strategic focus, and I will read them. Collaborating regularly with law enforcement agencies to examine policing among agencies and make recommendations for improvement. Improving police responsiveness to public complaints of misconduct. Number 3, improving overall police accountability. And number 4, keeping the public informed on matters related to police misconduct. The 2 questions that were posed to you was, 1, did you want to continue to call it strategic focus because that was what was put in the budget book? Dr. Coleman said no, she thought it should be called strategic objectives. The second was, and I think it's missing, whether or not you agree with these 4. Is that something?
Joe, for purposes of this exercise, I think personally, I had not seen that document that you sent. I do see in my email that I received it, but somehow it slipped past me. And I think that it would be better if we did actually get a chance to review it and to give it some thought instead of like on the fly, trying to give you suggestions.
Okay, and so I don't have a problem with that. I'm going to say it again. One of the comments was we need to move forward on the things that were required. And that's fine, but we tried to do it in a way to address concerns that we needed to move forward. If you all want to give me another date and then do it, what we said was we expected it today. I didn't get anything from anybody who said, oh, I can't get it done by today, by yesterday. So I don't have any problem, but there are some here, Ms. Bryant, that I think we can ask quickly because they're kind of yes or no. But I agree with you, it's going to be too hard in the time we have remaining to go that deep in here. But I do need to get a commitment so that we can put together the outline, right? This was intended so that we reflected your thoughts and not just staff and my thoughts. So I'm with you on that. But I'm going to ask you all today for a time certain and expect that that's when we'll get it back so that we can complete what we're required to do. The next one, which I hope will be pretty easy, the guidance talks about the mandatory duties of Police Accountability Board. What I found in the document was that they decided to restate the mandatory requirements. What we are suggesting is that in the mandatory section of the strategic plan, we use exactly what the legislation says and not pontificate on what we think it says. So would you all be supportive of that we use the legislative provisions and not the guidance provisions?
That's fine.
Yes, no.
Who is saying that we should use the guidance?
So the guidance, what it did was it would take something that was in the mandatory provision and it would extrapolate and decide what that mandatory provision was. And in some cases, in my opinion, it didn't necessarily catch what the mandatory provision was saying.
But who, I guess I'm asking who put that guidance together?
It was the work group that we.
Oh, then no, I would absolutely want the legislative
Okay.
Requirements.
Okay.
Not
So
the interpretation of the legislative requirements by the working group that was.
Okay,
The-
so that we're all in agreement with. So it'll be the legislative policies that takes us, guess what? Attorney Bryant, that takes us all the way to page 5. So see how we made great strides? And then there are some discretionary duties. They did the same thing. And we're saying use the actual legislative, but I'm not for today. But if you look on page 5, if you're looking at the document, there are 2 discretionary duties that were added by the guidance, I would ask that you let me know if you want to keep those two in there. We did not strike them. We thought that they were useful and consistent with some of the discussions we've had. So if you would let us know, that's under F. And they are guidance that are shown on page 6, if you would let us know if those work or not. The same thing under G, staff duties for the PAB, the guidance did not make a distinction as to who was responsible. We're suggesting we keep the legislative language and not the guidance language. We are now at the outreach. I'm hoping that we can give me a little guidance because Ms. Allen is working on this section. And I think it would be helpful for her to just get some general thoughts on from the committee. So I'm going to go through them quickly. And the first one is, so we talk about community stakeholders. We divided it. The first section is on community stakeholders, and it's developing a community outreach plan, one for FY23, and then the next one for FY24. We've talked about and are recommending developing a contact list of community stakeholders and also developing a training resource guide. The questions that we gave to you all were first on recommendations for community outreach activity. Does this body want to participate in existing activities, stuff that may already be happening and we attend? Is that something that as part of your community outreach you would want to do?
Sure.
Okay.
I would say yes.
I mean, we could see as they come up, we can see what's available and who wants to go, right?
I would also like for the staff to keep us abreast of those things. I mean, they're published in various, we don't always know what, where, and when. I know that several have happened in the last month that were kind of short notice for me, but that there's some way we can make it public to all of us when those town halls take place. And because
these may be something different. These may not just be town halls, any kind of community activity. I did ask you all if you had activities that you knew were going in the community. If you all would also share those as suggestions that we might look at.
Right.
So if you would, I think Dr. Bryan gave me about 10 of them. Very helpful in terms of places we might go. But if you all have some recommendations, that would be very helpful. And then the second question in there was the number that you realistically thought you could do in FY23 and then in FY24. Dr. Bryan suggested 4 each because remember, we're going to have that conversation about budgetary constraints when you go to these things. So I won't ask you today, but if you could look at the number you think that we should be doing if we participate in there.
And you keep saying Dr. Bryan, I'm not there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say? I'm sorry, Dr. Coleman. I'm looking at you and seeing you, Dr. Coleman. I was so happy to get your thing. I should not mess your name up, not once. So thank you. I'm sorry for that. The next one is, do you want to do PAB hosted meetings or activities? Where we come up with it, we design it, we develop it.
Personally, I think we should, but we need some of the information first. We haven't heard any cases. We don't know anything that's going on. And so I think that would feed our creation of some type of community event. And I think, yes, we should have them, but just.
So one of the ones in here talks about activity like a listening session or a town hall that would, that we would develop ourselves. So am I hearing that we can include that as an option in the community outreach plan, that we be the host of an event and not just attend other events? Okay.
Yeah, because I think I was going to make a point, because I think we do need to develop our own, along with a PowerPoint, if I'm old school, but PowerPoint where we can go to civic associations or community groups and tell them what the PAC is. And I'm saying this because, and I don't know about all y'all, people, and when they look at the Police Accountability Board, I'm gonna use Memphis, Nichols. We had a council person say, well, I'm going to talk to the PAP board because of that. And I think we have to explain to the community or do a PowerPoint to tell them what our roles is as the Police Accountability Board. So they're aware. Also that, that when we got these municipalities, they know that they had a problem and they went to Forest Heights mayor and it didn't do nothing, they can come to us. I don't think people are playing, really playing about our role. And I think we can basically do some outreach to get that across to people. And if we can develop like a PowerPoint to explain that we can take, we don't have to go out every day, but if I go to the Tantalus Civic Association, they have me there and I explain, our Police Accountability Board. And I think that's where we should go. And also if it's a town hall meeting, we explain that and do the PowerPoint and then ask questions. Because I think people have a misjudgment, a misunderstanding of what our roles is. I think some people in the community think that if something happens, we can go and just fire a policeman. It ain't like that. It's a process, and we need to make that plain and get what we do so people will understand that.
Helpful. Thank you. The PowerPoint. Denise.
I just wanted to say that Anne Arundel County has a listening session that's happening on the 27th. They go out into the community, and it's just basically that, the listening session where they hear the community give their views and opinions about what's going on with policing in their community. And that listening session is going to be online. So you might want to check that out. It's on the 27th of this month.
And Danny, I think.
And it's their PAB.
Danny, I think I saw your hand.
I was just going to mention that I would vote yes, we should have our own, but we can obviously settle the structure and type and forum and all that later. But
Thank you.
my initial vote is yes.
The other question that we wanted to know, and again, some of this is very specific because once we do this plan, we got to implement it. So I know there are a lot of things we want to do, but this is going to talk about what we short term, to use Mr. James, immediately what we're going to get done now. The other question for you all is, if we do PAB initiated activities, how do we want to do it? Do you want to say one in North County, Central and South? Do you want it by councilmatic districts? What would be your preference if in a fiscal year we were to do? Again, knowing if we do by councilmatic, that would mean doing nine events at hosted events. If we did Central, South, and North, then that would be 3 events. Any preference on your part?
You said 99 or 3 events?
Nine.
Oh, 9.
Yes.
It's
If
like
we did it by
99 seems like a lot.
if we did it by councilmatic.
Well, some of the council members have their own and we could attend those and then.
I'm only talking about the PAB hosted ones,
Yeah.
not the.
Yeah, if we're gonna do it, I think we can do 3, and those people, those councilmatic districts in those areas can come to that. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And we would send the information out to the council members along with the municipalities within those areas, so they could come there. But it has to be our meeting. We don't need listening session because, like I said, I don't think everybody's is aware of our role, you know what I mean? So we'll be hearing stuff that is not relevant to us, you know what I mean?
Yes, so I think Mr. O'Neill made a suggestion that we do North, Central, and South, and then whatever the relevant councilmatic districts in those areas, we would reach out to them. Is everybody okay with that as a method?
Also, we would break it. We would also, I mean, and break it down that notify those municipalities in those three areas too. So they would come, you know, so
For the
Morningside,
councilmatic and the municipalities.
right, that we have under our privy, you know what I mean?
That's helpful. Thank you, Mr. O'Neill.
Mr. James has his hand up, Monica.
The next one is, and somebody,
James has his hand up.
oh, I'm sorry.
I know you're looking down, that's why.
Yeah, I'm right, taking notes.
I appreciate, thank you. I appreciate that, Mr. Chair. My reservation, just so the board understands, and I'm trying to be very specific about some things. But my concern is the Police Accountability Board does not have credibility in the community to host its own event right now that someone would come to. We almost have to tag onto some credible messenger within the community so that people will come. And so right now, this year, it may not be the best idea to host our own until we're able to build those credible messengers and some relationships with existing entities in the community. So I would hate for us to put a lot of effort into, even if it was 3 or, you know, in each councilmanic district, and we set it up for 2 people to show up, because I promise you it's more than 2 people that's going to work to put it together. So I hear it. I think it's a great idea. I think we have to be realistic about some of these things, because again, we're dealing with a subject that people are already distrustful of, and we've got to talk about building trust. And we're just saying we're coming in there as authority. I think something to be mindful of as we're thinking about how we engage the community.
Okay, thank you, Mr. James. So what we're going to do is, I think Ms. Allen is hearing it loud and clear. Danny, I see you. What we will do is we'll put them, when we do this outline, we'll put them as options. Mr. James, I lost you. Oh, there you go. Keep going on different places and on this screen. We'll put both, and then when we have that discussion, you all will be able to vote as it relates to what you want to do in this fiscal. Well, not this fiscal year, because not going to be able to do too much because we'll be done in June. But for FY, what is it, 24? Right? That's going to be the full year.
Right. The question was asked in this fiscal year and next. And I'm just saying, I have some concerns, reservations about how aggressively we do some of these things. Because I think we need to build credibility, as Mr. O'Neill said. There's a lack of understanding of what the Police Accountability Board does. I think, for clarity, you know, we're a policy body. We are literally a policy body, and cases are handled somewhere else. That's not even in our purview. We're a policy body that evaluates the outcomes, but we need to make sure we're clear on that, make sure we have our messaging clear internally as we prepare to go externally with that and build that credibility in the community.
Well, let me just make one slight correction on that policy board. And that is that there is, and as you go back to the mandatory or the requirement, you all actually have investigatory powers.
Authority,
and
yep.
you have subpoena powers. There is effort, and those come after the ACC. There are efforts to create concurrent jurisdiction on those powers that would take you beyond the policy realm and into the investigatory realm. Don't know if that legislation will go through, but certainly you have it on the backside, and you may end up getting it concurrently with the ACC, depending on how that vote is. So I just want to make sure you all know you have a little more power than was originally intended, because if you look in the guidance, even though it's in the state legislation, and I think in the county, it was not included in the guidance that was provided to each one of you, which may cause some confusion.
I think, you know, what Mr. James is saying is right, but I also think if we make the invite or the announcement to the community attractive enough for people, I think we could get a good crowd in there that we basically, so that people will understand our role and stuff. That's what I'm saying. But it's going to have to be some preparation in putting it out there. You know, you're right. that we probably had 2 or 3 people, but I think with a lot of things happening around the country, I mean, even, you know, between me, you and the gatepost, police civilian board before us, and nobody know about them. You know what I mean? You know, I'm just saying, but if we do it right, I think we can get a good crowd. I'm not saying it overwhelming, but I don't want us to go to a meeting, somebody else's meeting, and people attacking us. and we can't defend ourselves, you know, as a board.
Thank you for that. Danny, did you have a comment?
I think you mostly answered it, actually. I think if I'm understanding this correctly, you're essentially saying, do we want to do some of our own events? And I would say, yes. I would say we may want to get some of our own house in order first before we do a lot of that, and make sure that we can have something that where we go listen to people, that we have a mechanism to do that. But I think you're not saying that we have to plan all that out tonight. You're just saying, do we like the idea of doing some of our own events? And to that, I would say yes. And we need to think about our time and getting our own stuff in order first, which is, I think, what you're proposing, if I'm not correct.
And yeah, right, you're dead on. This is just so that when Ms. Allen puts together her recommendation, she has some guidance on kind of direction, so that we might be able to get the recommendations, and then you all can make a determination
But
on it.
what kind of events we want to have and where we
Right.
have them and all that,
Yeah.
you're just kind of feeling this out a little bit, right? And not,
Right.
we're not locking anything down or making a hard decision or something.
We just
Okay.
want to know if it's in the
Yep,
universe
that sounds great.
options. Okay.
Thank you.
The last one in this section, and we're not gonna go through the whole thing because it will, but we're gonna go to a certain point, and then you all are gonna go look at it and send me this stuff back by Monday. So the next one is individual community meetings like civic associations. And one of the things, if you decide you want to do those like civic associations, what would be the criteria on selecting them? Because I'm sure everybody has a different view on if we have to narrow them down. So if we decide, like Dr. Coleman suggested, maybe we do 5 each year. If we're going to do those individual, how do we select which ones we're going to do? So if you all could think about that to help us kind of know how how we're going to select them, so we can narrow them down, because there's just so many activities in the county. But you can do that on your own. The next one had to do with use of technology to facilitate the outreach. One of the things we talked about, the team talked about, was doing surveys. If that's something you all would be interested in, us using technology, please include that when you respond to this document. The other question is, do you want to offer
You
training?
got a hand, baby.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I got a quick question. When you say use of technologies, do you mean like hybrid meetings like this where we have online, or what do you mean by the use of technologies, please?
Technology to do surveys, to send it out to, different kinds of technology. And I think it's somewhere down here on assessments that Dr. Coleman, you gave some I had never heard of, but different kinds of technology. Let me give an example. Can you give one? Because I had never heard of some of the ones you brought up.
Sure. So I recommended Google Jamboard. And so Google Jamboard is pretty awesome. So say if we're going to do some sort of exercise where what it mimics virtually is if you were in a room meeting, and we've probably done this, is if you're doing a flip chart exercise, or you put your Post-its on the wall, like you write certain things down, a facilitator will ask you a question, you write it down on a Post-it note, and you stick it on a wall, or someone comes around in a basket and collects that. So what Google Jamboard does is that it has virtual Post-it notes. So you can type on the notes and then hit enter, and then they all sort of virtually go up on the wall. And so then you can move them around, and you can group them by themes, and then you can save all of those notes and then go back and type up, if you want to, type up notes for the group to capture what's on those Post-it notes. You can do that. So that's an example.
I think I've seen that one before. So Danny, it's just using, the traditional way is going out, talking to them or doing a listening session. Do we want to use other techniques to try to gauge community participation, gauge community
Yeah,
engage?
that clarifies it. Thank you.
Uh-huh. The next one is, do you want to offer training as part of community outreach? Is that something you want included in the outreach plan?
Where we would be providing training to,
We wouldn't necessarily,
Well-
but we might facilitate. Go ahead.
Marvin, I thought this was more what kind of training they wanted. This is a separate section from outreach now.
No, this is inside of the outreach.
Which one are we under?
I'm under E.
I guess I've gone too far then.
Yeah, it's still under community outreach.
Key.
so we would either facilitate training or provide training of some sort or arrange for training.
Yes. For community, do we want to get in that business or not?
Well, see, I think that's what the PowerPoint would be doing is if we had a PowerPoint that we could take out to a group, and that would explain our role. We don't need to train them for anything, because they're not good on the board. I mean, but they would get an understanding of what our role is in the community. That's what when I was talking about the PowerPoint. So, and if they want to then take that PowerPoint, we would give it to them, so they could do to other groups. I mean, that's the way I was looking at this. So we don't need to train nobody, you know what I mean?
But there are some people who thought that would be a nice something to do. So when you all look at this, if you would just let me know if you think that's something you want to be in the wheelhouse of the PAB. And then if you say yes, then we can include it as an option. And then we can decide what that might look like. Okay. Then the other one I would ask you, and we don't have to do it tonight. If we have these PAB, do you want to do it on your own? Would you want to invite county council members to join you? Would you want to invite the county executive, members of staff, law enforcement representative, or do you want to do this solely PAB? So if you would answer that question too. So as Ms. Allen is putting it together, she knows if that's an option that y'all want to consider.
Say that again. I don't understand what you mean, to have them with us.
So if you go out and do a town hall, would you want it to be just I'm using this as an example, Ms. O'Neill. Would you want it just to be a PAB, or would you want to invite that council member from that district? Would you want to invite the county executive? Would you want to have with you a law enforcement person? That's the question.
Yeah, I mean, but I understood that. I mean, I understood when I was saying the PowerPoint and we go out, that was understood like the bar, that we would notify those people that we are having a meeting. That they if it's the mayor for Morningside and we're having it in this town hall, he would be there, or the commander on Fort Washington Road or whatever, he would be there, or the council person. I mean, they should be, that's up to them, Yeah,
there's a continuum. Are they invited? Are they going to be asked to speak? I mean, there's a continuum of participation. So all we're trying to get to is what that continuum is for you. And it may be different for everybody, but that's just, again, we're trying to put together recommendations. So want to know the thinking of this group as we try to put it together.
And all I was just saying is this, that should, they should be included. They should come, we just give them a time that they ain't taking over our meeting.
I got, okay, yes, sir.
That ain't no heavy lift, baby. Yeah.
Everything is a heavy lift. So
no, it ain't no heavy lift.
Let me just say this one more time. We are trying to put together recommendations, give you a document to react to, but as we put it together, want to make sure we get some feedback early so we aren't going left when you all want us to go right. That's really what this is intended to do. The last section that I'm only going to read it. You don't have to answer it tonight. We had a pretty extensive discussion about law enforcement and what meetings and what perception that brings. So in B of this outline, we asked you about meeting with law enforcement, the format that you would like to see if you meet with them, how long you think typically you would want it to be. So if you could speak to those kind of questions, that would be very helpful. Criteria, oh, thank you, Dr. Coleman. I see here, like, we might want to look at police chiefs. Do you want the assistant chiefs? Do you want the specialized units when you meet with them, the patrol officers? We want to get a better sense that what meeting with law enforcement means for you. Because how many, Denise, do we have to do for a quarter? I mean, for a fiscal year?
Quarterly, yeah.
Yeah. So we need that. The other question for this is all part of the outreach. If you all will answer, do you want to meet with state and local officials as part of your outreach efforts? That might be Barry Stanton, that might be the county council, that might be the attorney general, that might be delegates and senators. We just want, as we come up with this program of work, who you might want to meet with, if any of those kind of individuals. And then Ashley or Miss Ritter is working on the assessment trends and best practices. So if you will take a look in that section, it asks you to provide recommendations for performance and progress measures, and to be very specific as to what kind you would like to see us do for each one of the areas, whether it's the community outreach, whether the public relations, whether it's training, whatever it is, we want some recommendations on assessments and how we're going to capture best practices. So you'll see a list of questions on there that we would ask that you ask. And if you know some tools that we might use for determining, doing assessments, or marking trends, or looking at best practices, if there's some technology out there, some kind of data feeds, please include that in here so that we can start looking. Same way, how we want to show the recommendations. You all are supposed to make recommendations based on what you receive, and you're also supposed to be talking about best practices, how you want that to be shown and transmitted to the community. We're asking you that. And then we talk about in here technology, what we currently use, and then for you all, provide any recommendations for technology tools that you might think. I think Dr. Coleman talked about SurveyMonkey, JotForm, and Venngage. So I'm learning new things now because I've heard of most, but not all of those. And then whether or not you want to do training, we can review. We've talked about what training opportunities, like with the judgmental training, but if there are any other trainings that you all are interested in doing, if you can include that in your responses to this. And then Denise will, when we start to put all this stuff together, we will put some budgetary narrative to it, so we can see what the impact if we do everything that you all are talking about doing, because it does take money. I know this is a whole lot, but the more we can do in the preparation before we actually have the strategic planning session, I think the better it's going to be for us. So again, I am asking that you take the time to answer the questions to help inform Tangi in particular and Ashley as they put together their recommendations for you at the strategic plan. So
Also to put
Yes,
in there, a retreat, even if it's up in our office up there for the weekend or something, one Saturday or whatever like that, we have a retreat so we can go over, you know what I mean?
that's what this
Same
is
thing.
for. This is to put that so we'll be ready to have that. We don't want to start at zero. We wanted to start with something that you could respond to and not just have to figure it out from ground. I don't want to use ground zero, but we will put together some documents for you to react to. And this, your comments on this will help us to be able to put that together. I took my glasses off, so I can't see, but I'm telling you, I feel like deer in the headlights. Any questions or comments? Did I overwhelm y'all? Say something. Somebody get off
You
me.
ain't overwhelming. We just,
Okay.
we know you speeding. That's all we know that.
Okay.
So just to be clear, and this is what you're asking of us, is to look over those documents, provide a response before next Monday. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Thank you,
Thank you.
Danny. Is that something you all feel that you can get done?
Yes, I think I can get that done.
Mr. James?
Does that document need to be updated based on this evening's discussion? Because I would hate to provide input on something that we've scratched off or done away with. That's what I'm
I
asking.
don't think we've really done away. This is just a outline. So answer the questions. We're going to merge the answers. We're going to merge the answers.
So no new document is coming out, or we just go to the one you
No.
sent?
Yeah, just answer the questions on this one. So for example, Mr. James, you had said that you didn't want to do hosted, right? You didn't think in the first. That may still make it in here for a vote to see if your colleagues want to do a hosted, even though I know that would not be something. So there may be things that you are not, and I'm saying you and the collective may not want, but you'll still see it in here as an option, is what I'm saying. And we may get to a place where, like I was looking, I said, how many hosted events? You might have had 5, right? And then you might say attend 5. And then you say, okay, we want to do these 4 community events. And then you realize that's 20 events and that's not practical. So we'll start to pare down from there. So this document will be very, very broad. And then we'll pare down.
So, do we have a potential date for this strategic planning session?
Well, so here's the question, and Mr. O'Neill said something that was of interest, because he suggested we do it as a retreat. You all so far have only come up with the I think it's the 2nd and 4th Wednesdays.
Mm-hmm.
So you all will need to decide if this is something you think you want to do in sections and then still stick with those 2nd and 4th and do, part 1, this time part 2, or if you would prefer, for example, to do an all day something or a half day, something on a weekend. You can put that in there as a comment for us to look at.
Keep in mind the budget implications as well, because you may have to decide to not do one of your weekly meetings to do something on the weekend.
And so,
Denise,
Well, I mean,
Yes.
this is
we
really
got a budget.
fundamental.
We got a budget. You keep on saying budget. The legislation, we can go up to 1% of what the police got budget.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so we
That
ain't getting over
1%, the 1%
1%.
is the 1% is for the police accountability process, not just for the PAB.
Okay, that's what I'm
Shared by the
saying. And
ACC.
that's almost $4 million.
That's shared by the ACC and,
Yeah, I know that.
and the administrative hearing board.
I understand that. So, I'm just saying, that's a lot of money. We ain't hit
Yeah,
there yet. I'm
Yeah,
just saying. I'm just saying, I'm just saying, we at right now, we have $500,000. We're at $500,000. We ain't nowhere near that there, nowhere.
No, you're not. But what it says
But I'm
is
just
up
saying, I'm
to.
just saying that these, I mean,
But
I'm
you're
just
not
saying
letting me
that
finish.
people
I said
saying
up
that,
to.
and
It says
if
up
we
to
have to
that
go
amount.
over the budget, we're increasing, Denise. That's
No,
all I'm
all
trying
I'm
to say.
saying is, well, will you let me finish? All I'm saying is it says up to that amount. We have a budget that has already been, that we're working under right now. We have numbers that have already been assigned to us and they're working on next year's budget. All I'm saying is that we need to stay within the budget that we were given for this year. Going over means requesting a supplement that may or may not be granted. It has to be granted by the council.
And we just have to go to our principals in these and say we went over it because it was more work than we anticipated. That's all I'm saying.
And that's all I'm saying is it's not as easy as you're saying.
Yeah.
So Ms. Bryan, I think you had said something. You were continue.
Yeah, what I was saying, that this is a fundamental part of our organization. And that's what the budget is for. So I kind of agree with Mr. O'Neill. And this one is that we can't even move any further without establishing some ground rules. And, we've been floundering and trying to get things done. This is huge. I think we should devote enough time to have a all day or half day session to actually work these details out and come up with a document that can grow, yes, but that we'll have to function with.
So it is not in the document that I sent, but if each one of you would say to me how you would like to handle the strategic planning and from a time standpoint, if you would put that at the end of it, it would be exceedingly useful to us in trying to plan. So I'm going to close with this because, I'm going to take a point of personal privilege, Mr. Chair, on this, because I've heard it a couple of times and you all may get a little miffed with me. Ms. Bryan, it made me think of it because you talked about floundering. And let me say this, we had certain requirements that we had to do. One of them was to appoint someone to the ACC. Or whoever, appoint a member to the ACC. That was done. The next one was to put at least one person on the AHB. That was done. The other was to do certain things like understand the Open Meetings Act. That was done. Those were the priorities that we came in here to do. The next priority was to work on the strategic plan, which we are doing. And so I hope that you all will give yourselves and this staff credit for the fact that we are moving in the direction and and the other one, I'm sorry, was the annual report, which we did. So I think we need to give ourselves some credit for all these type A personalities, and I put myself at the beginning, that we are moving expeditiously at those things that we are required to do. And to suggest otherwise, I just think we need to be careful because we are going in the direction and we met every milestone that we have been asked to meet so far. And I have no doubt listening to you all today that as it relates to this strategic plan, we are going to do an outstanding job putting that together. So I want to say we're not floundering. We are just being very intentional and deliberate of meeting our statutory requirements. And with that, I look forward to receiving the information from each one of you by Monday, close of business. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for indulging the time. I know we went over. Well, we were close, actually, the time you allotted.
Oh, yeah.
Danny got his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, sir, Mr.
Danny Vergamini, I move that we take a 5-minute recess.
And
Oh,
he,
you watched the agenda, huh, Danny, and you saw it.
and he read my mind. Danny
Yes.
read my mind.
Before we do that, Mr. Chairman, I just want to thank Mara Jo. Thank you, Mara Jo. I know it was a lot. So thank you. It's appreciated. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
And the rest of the staff.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any seconds? I'm taking a 5-minute break.
It's on your agenda, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I just went, okay. And move, did we take a 5-minute break? I know Ms. Springs is already ready. So 5 minutes, it is now 11. Yeah, so let's come back at 11:17. I know that's the next minute, 11:17.
You mean 8:17?
Oh, I'm sorry. Right there that you said, Dr. Brian.
They gone. Look, I see all those cameras done gone off quick.
Thank you.
Except for Denise.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
But she's
I like
so-
her staying
so-
on.
Yeah, she's so committed.
Yeah, she's staying on
My
camera.
man,
That's
I
right.
was doing something on my phone. And now I can't turn the camera off. It's stuck. So y'all got to look at me until it gets
I'm
unstuck.
getting ready to say, even if you walk away, it'll be blurred, so, yeah.
Hmm.